No, not yet. Don't worry. We still have another minute, and it looks like we are missing Dave still, so we'll wait a couple more minutes. And Ron, we've got, I think, 4 public comments tonight. Would you feel comfortable doing being the time person again? Okay, we'll do 3 minutes. Oh, you're muted.
I have to go get my signs. They're downstairs. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay. Okay. All right, Inez and Bob, if you're there, come back. There she is. Bob must have stepped away. There he is. Perfect. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Newberg School District Board of Education, Newberg School District Board of Directors. All right, let's go ahead and start with a flag salute, and Brian has graciously volunteered, so go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which stands
one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. All right, so tonight's agenda, we've got a couple of things. We'll have public comments, and we'll go into board and superintendent comments. Our consent agenda, we've got 3 reports and presentations tonight. One is our school in-person update from Dr. Morlock, our monthly financial report from Nikki, and an update from our 2 ad hoc committees. And then we'll go into new business. We'll be looking at and approving the resolution for authorizing the sale of the bonds, approve the budget calendar, and discuss Spanish translation for our future meetings. And then we've got a couple of policies to look over tonight. First is ACB, All Students Belong, and the other one is IKAR, which is actually for information because it's an AR. It's about academic achievement, and Dr. Morlock will tell us more about that. All right, well, let's get started. So for public comments, what I'll do is call a person's name and then the person kind of in line as the next, just so you can get ready. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and Director Mock will have signs that will tell you when you've hit the 1 minute mark, the 30-second mark, and then your time. Like always, we are excited that you're here and offering insight and comments on your experience within the district. We do ask that you refrain from speaking about any personnel issues and also any sort of personnel or personal attacks on the characters of any board members. So with that, let's get started. First up, we'll have Espen Bach, and after Espen, we'll have Carolyn.
Excuse me, Brandy, did you say 3 minutes or 5 minutes?
3.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Hi, Espen, can you hear us?
Hello.
Good, hi, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name is Espen Bach. I'm an 8th grader from Mountain View Middle School, and I'm here in support of the All Students Belong policy. I was raised to be kind to everyone and everything. I was raised in a safe environment where I could learn and experience without being worried about my mental and physical safety. I had a good experience at school, being a carefree and ready to learn child for many years. Eventually, I found out about all the people who were not as lucky as me, people who were bullied or not encouraged to learn for baseless reasons like the color of their skin. I can only imagine what that must be like. So even if this policy does not have any large effect on me, it has to do with the community. It is our job as human beings to be supportive of each other and help each other grow. We all have our own thoughts, feelings, experiences, and lives. Hate symbols tell groups of people, "I don't think of you as human." The hate symbols listed as examples make groups of people feel uneasy and threatened. Even though we have a right to free speech, there's a certain point where what we say or do makes others feel like their rights are being taken away, which is restricting others' freedom. The fact that students are reaching out about this problem makes me happy that there is a group of kind people who want to help the community. It also makes me hopeful that I and everybody else will have a good experience going to school here. Since the school board passed the anti-racism policy, approving the all students belong policy seems like a clear choice to me because it is clarifying a key point of what has already been decided. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Espen, for joining us tonight. Okay, next we have Carolyn, and after Carolyn, we'll have Matthew. Hi, Carolyn, go ahead.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Carolyn Davidson. I'm a fifth grade teacher from Joanne Austin Elementary School. Tonight, I'm here to tell you about a project that a group of teachers in our Newberg School District are undertaking this year in the hopes of improving engagement and quality of education for the students in Newberg School District, especially during comprehensive distance learning. Myself, along with Marianne Hyatt, a counselor at Joanne Austin, Stacy Dalton, third grade teacher at Joanne Austin, and coaches Mona Khalil and Stephanie Nally, third grade teachers at Edwards Elementary and Joanne Austin, respectively, are working together to improve distance learning for students not only in our own classrooms and school, but for students across the district. As a team, we decided to tackle the issue described by the following statement. Elementary students are not equitably equipped to complete independent work and or attend live sessions. We are working as a team through the Educator Empowerment Academy and partner with the OEA to tackle this issue and to strive to make distance learning more equitable and accessible for all students and elementary students in particular. At this point, we have put in over a dozen voluntary hours towards this project. So far, our work has consisted of first understanding the guiding principles and equity lens that guides the work of the Educator Empowerment Academy. With that understanding in mind, we have developed our problem statement, an issue that we all feel passionate about, analyzed the problem with multiple approaches and perspectives to develop a deeper understanding of it, and discussed how to approach solving it. Additionally, we have created a set of questions to guide human-centered empathy interviews with members of the community in order to truly understand how this issue affects community members individually, and eventually when we begin our analysis of gathered information from the interviews as a whole. Moving forward, we plan to begin developing and implementing solutions and supports that benefit community members during this challenging time, supported by funding from the OEA. We will continue to get feedback from community members and revise and revisit our work to maximize the benefit for the community. We plan on updating the board in the spring about our work and the progress we have made. Please reach out to any of us with any questions that come up. We can be reached through our school email or by contacting the school at which we work. We hope you feel excited about our work and support our team and its plan as we move forward to support and take care of our community. Thank you.
Great, Carolyn. Thank you for the update. Also, our interpreter, Karina, let us know that we need to slow down our speech a little bit. And I know that gets kind of counter to me saying you only have 3 minutes, but if you go over by just a little bit, it'll be okay. Okay, so next we have Matthew, and after Matthew, we will have Midas. Hi, Matthew. Go ahead.
There. Good evening. My name is Matt Miller. I'm a shop teacher at Newberg High School, and this is my 4th year in the district. I'm also a member of the Newberg School District Anti-Racist Collective, a grassroots organization of district employees committed to educating our members and organizing action in support of the school board's anti-racist resolution. It came to my attention last week that the new policy, All Students Belong, is up for review, and that the board's full support of the policy is unclear. I'm here tonight to express my support for the policy and to provide evidence for its need in our district. I reviewed the footage from the last board meeting, and I wish to directly address one particular point. Around the 2-hour and 39-minute mark, Director Mock, referring to footnote number 2, asks for documentation as to how these symbols, the swastika, the noose, and the Confederate flag, might disrupt learning. The footnote itself calls for examples of previous incidents and current conditions. It also takes learning disruption one step further to include, quote, the rights of other students to be secure and be let alone. Before I continue, I want to give folks listening a heads up that the story I'm about to tell describes in detail a racist event. On October 5th, 2020, an intruder entered a virtual session of my geometry and construction class using a Google link we shared with our students. With their camera off, the intruder interrupted our lesson and began yelling profanities. The anti-Black, Islamophobic hatred spewed forth in those seconds seemed to last forever and was unparalleled to anything I've experienced in any context, let alone my own classroom. The final and most heinous barrage was aimed directly at 2 Black students in my class. Quote, how much rope does it take to hang an N-word? Let me be clear. I believe this is nothing short of a death threat. The imagery of a noose unequivocally calls to mind the lynching of African Americans in this country. Imagine for a second as a student hearing that kind of hate speech and being asked to carry on with a lesson or go to your next class or focus on your geometry homework that week. Wouldn't you say your learning has been disrupted? How long will it take you to feel safe in school again? Will your grades suffer because of it? Your attendance? My students were targeted for the color of their skin and their lives threatened for simply coming to school, for living in Newberg. This happened in our schools. It happened in my classroom. Perhaps you're thinking this intruder could have come from outside the school community, maybe even outside of Newberg. Yet there is ample evidence to suggest this was a student in the class. Within a span of 10 minutes, I changed the Google Meet link 3 times, sharing it only with my students in the hopes of removing the threat. Each time, however, the intruder reappeared, disguised as a different student, and each time the violence intensified. To the board members who may still be skeptical, how many incidents like this will it take before you get that racism is real in Newberg? Your job is to enact policy so that we can have the hard conversations with students, so that we can interrupt racism when we see it or hear about it, so that we can work toward changing the culture of our schools to be more empathic, more equitable, and more just. I strongly encourage you to affirm the All Students Belong policy and to continue the work, both personally and collectively, that you began this summer with your anti-racist resolution. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Matt. Great, next we have, actually, Greg, do you know if Midas is joining us or if Ruth?
Yes, I see Midas.
Okay, great, great. Come on in.
Midas, we're ready when you are.
Hello. My name is Midas. I'm a student at Catalyst High School. A group of students from Catalyst met through Google Meets to go over the All Students Belong policy and write a response. What I'm going to read was a collaborative effort, and somehow I got nominated to read it. We would like to share our support of the All Students Belong policy. As we got to talking, As we got to talking, we realized that all of us have stories about discrimination and harassment. It was sad, but all of us ended up feeling supported by talking about it with each other. We too recognize that all students are entitled to a high-quality educational experience, free from discrimination or harassment based on perceived race, color, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, or natural origin. Unfortunately, this has not been our experience. In the past, students have sometimes felt put down because of their gender identity, race, or disability. We have personally witnessed and/or experienced harassment in all of these areas. In one instance, a group of white students was a group of white students were calling a Black student the N-word. They sounded like they were joking, and the student being targeted shrugged it off because they didn't want to make a scene or be disliked. Last school year, we had a student at Catalyst who regularly wore a Confederate flag in their back pocket, a bandana. They also had the Confederate flag as their phone wallpaper and laptop wallpaper. One time they were studying with a Black student who was very uncomfortable with the wallpaper, but did not feel able to confront the student. The study session was unsuccessful and it definitely interrupted learning. In another example, a student was walking home from school with a friend of Latinx descent. A group of students approached them, telling the Latinx student to go back to where they came from. When the student said that they were from Chicago, the approaching students insisted that they meant where they were really from. Another one of us had an experience of talking to a volunteer at the school about another student who was transgender. The volunteer continually referred to the student by the wrong pronouns. When corrected, the volunteer defended themselves by invalidating the student further, saying that it was easier for them to use the wrong pronouns because the student's appearance. Nearly every student writing this letter has heard slurs used in the school environment, and "that's so gay" is commonly heard in the day-to-day school life. Another one of us heard students calling them the F slur behind their back. Every student in this letter that is a member of one of these minority groups has had slurs directed at them. There are even multiple students who are afraid to attend GSA because they don't want to be targeted. As a group, we discussed the tension between freedom of speech and freedom from discrimination or harassment. We recognize that the Confederate flag in particular can be displayed not as a way to support slavery, but as a way to show belonging. One student who used to live in the South said Confederate flags were common there and a way of displaying Southern pride. Another student pointed out that the history of the symbol should be taken into consideration. In the case of the Confederate flag, it being a symbol of a failed country that wanted to keep the institution of slavery is very important. For someone to have empathy for a Black person seeing that symbol displayed, they would need to know that history and how that history could make somebody feel. We're glad that the policy says the district will use non-disciplinary remedial action whenever appropriate. We believe that most incidences of discrimination or harassment are best dealt with by sitting down and having a conversation instead of punishment. This provides an opportunity for empathy and mutual understanding. On behalf of Keelan, Sam, Jeremy, Ruth, Lily, and Kaylee, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with you, and we hope that you pass this policy.
Thank you, Midas, for joining us, and please send our gratitude to the other people in the group as well. Okay, with that, we will move into board comments. Rebecca, do you have any comments this evening? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, I want to thank all those who spoke tonight. I know for the students, it's a big thing for them to speak in front of such in Zoom meetings, and I appreciate all the input. This last Monday, I had an opportunity to attend a webinar sponsored through Oregon School Boards Associations called Dealing with Conflict on the School Board. And I would just recommend that to the rest of my members of the school board as it's a webinar that you can listen to help us navigate our roles on the school board as a school board. And as we go through these difficult discussions we've had in the past, it gives a good springboard for that. And I want to wish everyone a good holiday season. I know we're getting close to the end of the year and hope 2021 is going to be a better one. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, do you have any comments this evening?
Yeah, I'd like to also thank everyone who took the time out of their evenings to come and speak to us. These are very complicated and complex issues, and they deserve our full attention and thought. And hopefully we will do that this evening.
Dave, do you have any comments this evening?
Yeah, I echo Brian. Thanks for especially young people calling in to speak to a group. It's tough. Appreciate you guys. Not sure who that first young man was that called in, but he needs to be doing speeches out there. He was pretty darn good. So thanks again, you guys, for calling it or talking tonight. Thank you.
Yeah. Ron, do you have any comments this evening?
No, I don't have any. Thanks.
Inez, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I just want to take some time to thank everybody working really hard, the teachers, administration, during this distance learning time. As somebody who did test positive for COVID, it impacts people on a large level, not just the people who get COVID, but the whole family and extended family. So thank you for everybody trying their best to make education as valuable as and important as possible during these difficult times.
Thank you, and I'm really glad that you're here tonight. Bob, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? No. Do you have any comments tonight?
Yes. First of all, just kind of a housekeeping thing. I'm on my phone tonight. The internet is out of my house, so when I disappeared earlier, if I switch screens to look at the agenda, the way this setup is, my camera disappears, so I apologize for that. And I just kind of want to use that as a small window into the challenges that many of our students, families, teachers are facing on a daily basis, trying to navigate education today. I'm lucky that I've got a backup way that I can connect tonight, but not everybody has that resource. And even if you do, it can be really stressful in the moment. For my girls this morning, they had the chance they could go over to grandma and grandpa's and use their internet. But it was really stressful for a while there. And so I just want to say that my thoughts are with all the folks at every level of the district that are negotiating those new challenges that are out there. And I also want to thank folks who shared tonight, particularly when folks share something that's really hard to share. That's very meaningful to me as a board member, to put yourself out there to speak from your heart. And so I want to thank everybody who did that tonight.
Thank you. I'll echo what everybody said. I think I really appreciate educators coming and telling us about their experiences, and the work that they're doing at the classroom and building level is so important. And also for our students, it takes a lot to come and talk to people in a board meeting on a Tuesday night. And what Midas didn't say was that also that was sent to the board in an email. So I really appreciate that group of students getting together, collaborating, and being very thoughtful on sharing their experiences tonight. Okay, with that, we will turn it over to superintendent comments and Dr. Morlock.
All right, thank you, Chair Penner. I will start off quickly by just reminding everybody that this is National Hand Washing Awareness Week, December 6th through 12th. So I hope that you are paying attention to washing your hands, not touching your face, covering your cough, and wearing your mask. But for those of you who did not know, it is National Hand Washing Awareness Week. I also would like to thank all of our speakers tonight. Really appreciate hearing from everyone, from employees, from students, and from the public. So thank you all for joining us for doing that. I also would like to thank our Newberg City Councilors, Elise Yarnell Holloman, Julia Martinez Blancarte, Denise Bacon, and Stephanie Finley. Last night, they voted and passed a budget adjustment in a resolution authorizing sharing of some of the city's CARES Act dollars with the district. We had put in a request, at their request, an opportunity to get some of those dollars if they were available to support our distance learning. Back to Bob's comment, actually talking about connectivity. we've purchased about 750 hotspots. So if you think about it's not just serving one, but serving multiple. Some people are able to work from home because they've got that connectivity as well. So really, I just want to thank those city councilors for supporting us, and those dollars are going directly to families here in Newberg in need, Newberg and actually in Dundee. We did a few other things too, of course, computer devices and some infrastructural updates, but just wanted to give a shout out. That was the last night at their city council meeting. So thanks again for your support of our students and of our community. And then finally, it is the holiday season. It's not just one holiday, there are many holidays. And I think that it's important to remember that there's always room for another holiday. As a side note, for those of you who have been to Spain, they actually have a holiday all 365 days of the year in different parts of the country. So they have found ways to be able to celebrate all year long. And so I just want to remind folks that there are lots of holidays that are celebrated during this time coming up in the next few weeks, in fact, in the next few days. And so just, enjoy the time with your family, with your friends, doing most of that, of course, via your laptops, your phones, your iPads, and anything else you're able to see each other. So we can kind of get through this thing. I know that we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that feels very good. And then just during this time, remember, especially this year, every year it's a challenge for folks who are less fortunate, but I think even more so this year, lots and lots of people in need. So if you can keep them in your thoughts, any kind of support you can give for those who don't have or who have far less, I just encourage you to give what you can to those who have less than you. So thank you very much. And I will turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you for updating us on that city council meeting. It's really good news.
Yeah,
you're welcome. Thank you to the city council. Okay, next on our agenda is our consent agenda. And I'd like to point out a couple of donations that we received, or the district. One is from the CVMS Parent Leadership Council for $2,055.26 for a CVMS laminator. And the other one is from Oregon State Credit Union, $300 to Joanne Austin Classroom Supplies. Thank you again, all those community partnerships. And with that, I would entertain a motion.
Randy, I'm just now noticing something on the JHH, which is included here. The copy we have here is the OSBA model policy and not the policy we adopted. We were talking about last time with the second paragraph that should be out of there. This paragraph is really not that important, but we did decide last time not to have it. And
I do apologize. That's my error.
I think when we do the motion, I think we'll have to say something about referring to the one that we worked up last week, or at least this one without that paragraph. Noting that was an error. Yeah, sorry.
How can we do this, Greg? Can we pull it out and then shoot? It would be good to know to review last meeting's packet to make sure it was the correct one.
Last meeting, the reason it's still in there is last meeting's packet, it was incorrect. I sent the correct one out to you by email, and then I just moved it over from last week. So that was my error. Perhaps the motion could say something like approving the consent agenda, striking the second paragraph from policy JHH as the policy committee intended.
See, Ron or Rebecca, policy committee members, can you make that motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we accept the consent agenda with the proviso that the policy OSB, that the policy JHH should have reflected the one that we were discussing last week without that paragraph.
I second that.
Yeah, I hope that works. I think it's clear.
Okay, the motion and second, is there any discussion? Ron, I'm glad you caught that. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And it passes unanimously.
I want to thank Greg for all the work he does. I would be jumbling these things way worse if it was me. So appreciate that, Greg.
Yes, thank you, Greg. Okay, let's move on to our reports and presentations. The first one up is a report from Dr. Morlock regarding update on in-person learning.
Great, thank you. Well, we are continuing our work on planning for bringing some students back into the building, even during this time where we're seeing case counts leveled off a little bit. We met again with our folks at the high school. We will be starting to wade into that after the break. So we're going to be looking at 2 very small groups returning. We have a teacher who's volunteered in CTE to kind of help us work through the details and begin to do some work in Tiger manufacturing. So it's a cohort of 4 students and a cohort of 5 students. It would be happening again after the break. They'll be meeting with parents to talk through the process. They've already contacted all of them to begin with to see what their comfort levels are. So we have still quite a bit of work to get done. That's why we're still waiting until that time period to work on that. But as we move forward, then we will continue to refine the protocols and the way that we have people coming in, and then start to look at our students who are struggling. We know we have to focus on, we do have some things to work with on some seniors who are in danger of not graduating, when we have further students who are struggling with internet connectivity or some kind of support. So some people are finding some pods, and so we're going to be figuring out how to kind of put that together. It'll be a very slow and very methodical process, but I did want to let the board know that we'll have about 9 students we'll start off with, and then we'll kind of move forward from there if things work out the way that we think they will. So just wanted to give you an update that those plans are starting to kind of come together. We've done a lot of discussion about them. As we go forward from that, then we would expand, of course, into other grade levels, but we still have quite a bit of work to do on our transportation plan and cohorting of students and staffing. We're working with both of our associations to talk through all of those things, because there's a lot of work to be done on the back end to make sure we can do this successfully. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I know that there's some things happening out there in the world in terms of vaccines and what have you. So we're trying to get ourselves kind of back to thinking about bringing more students in and getting especially the ones who are in critical need, get them the support they have right now. Later on, I'll discuss some changes that we've made to the AR to support students, as well as help our teachers navigate this process with students who are really struggling. So, and I'll go over those details later, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. There'll be more information coming. Of course, communications with all of that stuff, and we'll loop you in as our plans solidify. But I want to let you know that after the break, we'll be starting to bring a few kids in and begin that next process of getting back to some kind of normalcy, at least for a few students. And that's what I have for you for tonight. So we're still in the other process, holding pattern for our other groups, but we're making the plans and still developing them. So this is kind of a good news, small step, but it'll be good for our students at Newberg High School to begin with.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for Joe? Okay, well, we look forward to seeing what happens next month.
Yep,
Can I
me too.
I realized one of the things we didn't do. Joe, maybe you could just in Spanish invite people who are listening how they can connect with the interpretation down below.
Okay. Si ustedes están aquí y hablando español y quieren un poco de apoyo, tenemos todo aquí en español. Puede, no sé si está marcado de lenguaje, escoge lenguaje, es un icon de un mundo. Voy a apretar así y entramos en el otro audio que tenemos.
Thank you, Greg.
And Karina, you can make sure that I did that incorrectly, I'm sure. Thank you, Karina.
Good.
I got the thumbs up from Karina, so I didn't mess up too badly. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for doing that. Okay. Seeing no other questions regarding in-person learning, let's move on to Nikki. She'll present our monthly financials.
Good evening, everybody. My report this month was fairly short. We kind of put it out pretty quickly. I did update some of the numbers that will probably be taking a hit this year just due to the CDL that we're in right now. Like our rental income, you'll see that I reduced that. Miscellaneous revenue, which is just things that happen throughout the year that we get reimbursed for that just are not happening like they typically would. Investment interest, The rate dropped right at the beginning of the year and it has stayed very, very low. We're starting to get all of our tax money right now, so you'll see that bump up over the next few months. But I think it will come in a fair amount lower than it did last year. So I'm trying to just zero in on some of those small things that we see will not be coming in this year as it has in the past. As far as the bottom line, the ending fund balance is still pretty consistent right now. We have the auditors wrapping up. We're sending in a lot of our final information so they can pull together the financials. So we'll have that to the state by the end of the month. So with that information and with their final adjustments, at our January meeting, I should be able to have an update of our 1920 ending fund balance. I've been projecting it at about 8 million, but they do property tax adjustments and things like that that can move that a little bit. So we should have that pretty nailed down by our next meeting, which will be helpful. As far as expenses and stuff, there weren't any major changes that to recognize there. I wanted to talk a little bit about the governor's proposed budget. It's very, very early. I mean, this is just the initial stage, but I'm sure you've probably heard that there's not much movement with the state school fund. Currently, it's at 9 billion. She's projecting 9.1. That's not much for roll-up costs going into next year. But she did talk about the SIA funds coming in higher. As a projection, again, it's really early to count on a lot of these things, but that's good news if it does come in at the rate that she is talking about. Outside of that, there wasn't really anything there that really jumped out to me. Our enrollment, our in-house count that Tanya just updated looks pretty consistent from the last report. It dropped just a few kids, so hopefully we don't lose any more between now and the end of the year and maybe gain some back as we go into next semester. Let's see. That's about all I have right now, unless there are any questions.
Just a second. I have a question. I guess I got myself unmuted. I didn't know it. So that one from 9 billion to 9.1 billion is a little over a 1% increase, isn't it? Right about 1%. I'm just doing this in my head. I hope I get that right. So, and I just looked it up a little bit ago. The inflation rate they're projecting for the year is less than 1%. So how are we worried about roll-up costs that aren't responsive to inflation? Or otherwise, this would be a steady state, pretty much a steady state budget, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, but when we look at our roll-up costs, we look at our contracts that we have in place.
I forgot all about that because we've already
our steps and our COLAs that are already built in and negotiated right off the top. But yeah, we have some relief in the PERS. We did get an update from PERS. There was another report put out that says next year, yes, the rates are down a little bit, but after that, they balloon back up. Yeah. So it might help us next year a bit survive, but we still need to be very aware of what's still down the road with the PERS as well.
Yes. Okay, thank you. If I thought one more minute, I might not ask that question.
I like your questions. Come, bring it.
Good question. Any other questions for Nikki? Okay, well, we'll get back from the new year and relatively quickly get into budget season. So we'll have lots of opportunities at that point, especially. Yeah. All right, well, thank you, Nikki. Okay, next we'll move into our ad hoc committee reports. Would someone from the school start time committee please give us an update?
Yes. Let's see, it was today, the survey went out that we at our last meeting, we broke into some subgroups. We had one subgroup that started working on kind of gathering together both the research that's been done around the impact of changing start times, as well as kind of looking at the landscape of the area, what other districts are doing as far as start times. And then we had another group who put together a survey that went out today. So I encourage everybody who's listening, tell everybody, anybody you know who might be interested in the impact of possibly changing school times, to take about 15 minutes and go through that survey to give feedback. We've got a meeting scheduled for the 14th to kind of review where we're at and then take our next steps. I am going to meet tomorrow with the local manager for First Student and kind of talk about their perspective on some of the logistics of possibly making this change. And if there's anything I'm missing, Rebecca and Brian, just pipe up. Thanks.
I'll say I took the survey 3 times for 3 students, and maybe 5 minutes each time. So it's even quicker than 15. And I appreciate it. It's very thorough, talking quite a bit about the impacts, not only on students, but families as well. I appreciate that. Any questions for the start time committee?
I have a question, I guess. I like the survey too, although I don't have any students in the district right now, so I had to lie on the first page. Cass Thonstead said I could, but so I could just see the rest of it, and I didn't submit it, so my thing is not in there. But it did raise for me a little bit of a question. It seems to me that it's a good practice to start with a survey directed at the current population of people and students in the school. But it seems to me there's at least one other group that really does need to be asked, and these are parents of preschool students who may not be also represented because they don't have other older kids in the district. And their interests are, at least going forward, when this is going to be implemented, would be equal to anybody else's. So do you have plans on that with the group about talking to that group? I have one more question. I'll be done.
Yeah, go for it.
Second question is for current staff who don't have kids and their effect on them.
Yeah, the reaching out to preschool families isn't something that actually came up in our discussions, and I would be open to any suggestion. Off the top of my head, I don't know how best to reach out to those families, which would be kind of at this point the main hindrance. Yeah, other than just kind of word of mouth spreading that they can take that that survey, and I would just tell them to put their child as a kindergartner at the school that they'll be attending to get their feedback. I don't know how best to capture that.
I know that it has been put out on social media as a link. So I think you're right, Bob. Just encouraging people to, if they know of incoming kinders next year, to encourage people to participate.
Yeah.
And the question about staff?
Yeah, that's probably something we'll take up at the meeting on next Tuesday on the 14th. Is kind of the next step in this outreach is how to do the outreach to the staff. But that'll be a topic that I'll bring up at the 14th.
That's great. Any other questions for Brian, Bob, or Rebecca? All right. Well, thanks for all your work on this. It's clear that you all have been putting in a lot of time and effort, and the committee as a whole. We appreciate that. Okay, Equity Committee. Well, Inez gave it last time. I talk on these meetings all the time. So I'm going to ask Ron to give the Equity Committee update, and Inez and I can jump in if needed.
Well, I appreciate the chair's endorsement that I don't talk enough in the school board meeting. People.
Oh, I didn't say that. I didn't say that, but for this time.
We had a good first meeting last week. I think it's on Thursday evening or Wednesday. I can't remember now. One of those evenings I was there, and I think the whole committee was there. I can't think of who wasn't, if there was one. That's 12 people, including 2 students, I think 4 from the community, 3 staff, and the 3 board members, if that's the right numbers, something like that. We spent most of the time sharing some stuff about our own personal backgrounds, and including things that didn't relate to the equity issue at all, and then some things that did as a part of a team building exercise. And my own impression was that it was a fun discussion, and from what I can tell on Zoom and little tiny boxes looking at people's faces, mostly, I mean, compared to students when I've taught on Zoom, they're way more engaged. So I don't know what that says about who. I thought it went pretty well. I think Brandy and Inez may want to say something about that too. Our next meeting is going to be set. We haven't really set it up, I don't think yet. Oh, we did set it up. It's in January, early in January. We thought we'd decide not to try to fight through the currents of the week before Christmas for our meeting and just go into early January, and taking advantage of the fact that we're on a little bit of a break there. And I think at that point we would get into more of the starting to figure out how to accumulate our evidence of issues where people are experiencing barriers and stuff. I don't know what else to say. Is anything to add to that from Ines or Brandy?
No, I think you did a great job. It was really interesting to get to know a little bit more about some familiar faces even. And then of course there were people that I had never met. And so that was good to hear more about their sort of life stories a little bit.
The only other thing I would say is the reason we did get to know you activities is because we're intentional about this committee working together in good relationship. And for that, we need to build trust among us as a committee. So.
Great. Any questions for the equity committee? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on then to new business. We've got first up is approve resolution authorizing sale of bonds. And I believe that's Nikki.
Okay. I have not received any questions about this resolution. I'll speak to it a little bit. It outlines the total of our bond, the 141 million. It also refers to the awesome grant that we'll be receiving, and that's just over 5 million, I believe 5,026,000. We have, and it also outlines the different limitations that we need to meet. And so based on our discussions, we should be able to meet the threshold of spending 85% within the 3 years. That's a guideline. We have kind of a draft kind of schedule about how we're going to do that. And we feel like we could meet all those parameters with that plan. It's been reviewed and approved by our bond counsel. So it's pretty standard language, canned language that they put out there that and has all the guidelines that we need to have in there, saying the types of investments and what we need to do and everything. We have already worked with some folks around the investments after we sell the bonds because we cannot put that amount of money in our pool account. There's limits to it. So we will have it all set up to invest that money in various different ways and various different time frames in order to draw it down for the different projects. So we've worked on all of those things as well, which is a little bit outside this resolution, but we've looked at all of those pieces to try to get everything lined up. So are there any questions on it?
Okay, seeing no questions, I would entertain a motion.
Okay, let's see. I'll move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2021-05, a resolution of Newberg School District 29J, Yamhill, Washington, and Clackamas Counties, Oregon, authorizing the issuance, sale, and delivery of general obligation bonds, designating an authorized representative delegating the negotiation and approval of financial documents and related matters by title only.
I
will
second.
Okay, Bob and Rebecca get an arm wrestle it. Let's go with Rebecca. I think I heard her. And thank you, Inez. That's probably one of the longest motions in Newberg school board history. So well done. All right, is there any discussion around this? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And it passes unanimously. And thank you, Joe and Greg and other district staff working behind the scenes to get this all rolling. You know, it's from the 10,000 foot mark, it seems like, oh, well, it's all right. But I know that you all have been working tirelessly. So, and Nikki, I can't believe I forgot Nikki. Thank you. Okay, next up, we've got the budget calendar. And Nikki, you should just stay unmuted because
I don't have to talk very much, so it's just my day, my lucky day. Again, with this item, there have not been any questions that have come to my office. That's it's a standard schedule. We'll leave it open for adjustments. If the information changes, we might need to, just because the weird times right now, we might not have a lot of information at different times, but it's the best start that we can do right now, so.
Are there questions for Nikki regarding the budget calendar?
Nikki, is there anything different about this calendar in general than the one we used last year that we should notice?
No, we left a couple extra training type meetings in there before we get into the more formal ones. I don't think we haven't had a lot of turnover with the group, so we might do something a little bit different about what we cover in those meetings, just based on the different information. But as far as a structure, it's the same thing.
And I would suggest all board members put these dates in their calendar now. A lot of them coincide with board meetings, so they'll be before, but some of them don't. So it's a good reminder. All right, well, I would entertain a motion on this.
Let's see. I'll move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors approve the budget process calendar for 2021-22 as presented.
I second it.
Okay, motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, passes unanimously. So we have scheduled a break, but we're about 45 minutes ahead of schedule. Is the board comfortable with continuing, or do we need a break?
Let's go forward. Yeah.
Keep going. All right. So next up is discussion around Spanish translation at future board meetings. So when we initially did this, we kind of only approved it for a limited amount of time. And we need to kind of have the discussion and make the decision on if we want to continue with it through the rest of this school year. It has been a little bit more, about roughly $50 more than expected, because we had one board meeting go to 3 hours. So it could be good for us to remain efficient in our board meetings if we know we're being charged by the minute. No, I'm not sure it's by the minute, but so what are some thoughts on this?
You know, I saw that the cost difference, you know, $50 seemed pretty minimal and pretty reasonable for the benefit that we're getting. You know, I think that I'm very much in favor of sticking with keeping the translation. And I think particularly if we keep with it, we'll be able to promote it and get more folks engaged if they know they can count on that translation service being available. So I'd very much like to see us keep that service available to folks who wanted that translation.
What was the $50?
One of the meetings went a little over the 3 hour mark, so it was charged an additional amount. Then it was a rough estimate on how much it was going to be, depending on the length of meetings.
So the monthly is like $570 a month. Is that
Let's
what I
see.
read? I don't know.
In the packet, it says the original estimate was for $261 per 3-hour meeting for an average of $522 per month. The actual cost for the exact time of our 2-hour meeting covered by translation was $570, slightly higher. This was due to one meeting going over 3 hours.
So the rate per hour has been exactly what was estimated. The only reason the estimate was different was that the time was longer than we ran as an estimate.
I gathered from this that there's a flat fee up to 3 hours and then there's an extra fee if over, or is that not the case?
The way that they do it is they have a minimum charge of 2 hours, and then it's kind of prorated on incrementals after that for what you actually do.
Okay.
Joe, do you know, has this been announced at the Latinx parent group meeting? Yeah, okay.
Yes, we've spoken. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, just we've gotten the word out there to other folks about them being available, about the interpretation being available. So I think we'll continue to push that. We've got another meeting coming up Thursday evening, if I'm not mistaken. It's second Thursday of the month, and so we'll do that for each one of the meetings to remind folks that it's available. Yep.
Have we received any correspondence to the effect of people saying, yeah, I used this service and it was great?
Not to my knowledge.
Because I've noticed that the sort of number of attendees hasn't really changed at all from what it used to be, which makes me think that we're paying $500 a month for something that people aren't using. And I understand that in the future, people might show up and use it, and that's great. But at a time when we're facing, potential budget cuts, it seems like $500 a month is money that might be better spent on school supplies or books or any number of other things. So I think we should suspend the service.
When I first got on the board, one of my goals was to have the meetings be available in more than just English. And here, because of Zoom, we've been able to do this translation service. But I don't want to just check a box and say that we're providing the service and it's now accessible to everyone. So I've listened during one meeting, and I don't know if internet being spotty was an issue or what not, but I don't know that the translation, that people are getting the entire or most of what is being said at our meeting. So that being said, I would want more people to join, listen, give us feedback, and see, is this a service we want to continue, or do we look elsewhere to meet this need? Because I don't think we should be providing this and it not meet people's needs. Saying we're doing something doesn't mean anything to me if the impact is not there.
Well, we've just had two comments about impact. They both they go different directions but I think they're both right in the sense that we need to know what the impact is and try to improve it. My own personal sense, what I would probably think is worth it if it was just there as a backup emergency for the case in which we need to have 20 or 30 families who can't keep up with the English. It would be worth the $6,000 if that happened once every year or whatever. 6,000 being it's a little over 6,000 a year, the way that this is ramping up, because it's important on basic democratic principles that every constituent have access to the information they need to be able to hold us accountable as a school board. And if there's a significant population that needs this, not necessarily every school board. I mean, I went for 4 years when we maybe had 15 total members of the public come to watch a school board meeting when their kids weren't there presenting from their school. I mean, and we kept it open even though nobody was using it. Significantly more expense than this is, I would say. I think that that making it available is to people is essential. And at $500 a month or a little bit more, it's worth it to me. I also think that we do need to make sure we can enhance its impact. So, it'd be nice to know how many people are connecting through the Spanish network every week, every time we meet. Have a little report on that. I don't know if it's hard to get that data, but if it can be generated nearly automatically, we got to have it. I don't know how to deal with the quality of the. I think Inez's idea about how to get feedback as to whether the quality of the translation is up to what we're trying to accomplish. I think that's part of what we got to do. We need to have some sort of ongoing monitoring of that to make sure it does.
It's 8 o'clock.
Anyway, so I'm at this cost. I'm in favor of continuing, even if people don't show up sometimes, and I do think that for both the reasons that Brian's mentioned and Ines has mentioned, we need to figure out if there's some way we can monitor the effectiveness.
I think it's clear from the discussion that we need more outreach to that population, and we can't rely on Dr. Morlock to do that. So as a board, how do we want to tackle that?
Hey, Brandy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like everybody's bringing up the question of how many people are participating in this. Maybe the bigger question is if we can continue this on, say, for another month or two, and get some type of data on that. But maybe the bigger question is in general, the school board, how are we getting out there to the entire city, and how are people accessing this, or are they not? They just don't want to, or they don't know about it. I mean, we've talked about this before, where we even have staff members call in and don't really understand the role of the school board. So maybe it's something we just have to discuss about how we get out there to all our constituents. If we're going to do that, then, I think we should continue on with what we're doing, for maybe not the whole school year, but for another month or two to get some type of data point on this. But I still think the bigger question is how are we reaching the entire community? And like Ron said, 15 people forever. COVID has offered this Zoom thing, that's different. So it seems like that's increased our numbers, but maybe we should try to figure out how we can market out to more parents and stuff like that, so they can understand what we're doing a bit more for their kids.
Yeah,
big question.
Yeah, I think the general community involvement is a big one. Some of the things that came to mind in this discussion for the Latinx parent population specifically, the Latinx parent group, obviously, but also I know the Mountain View parent group has a large population. They've got a good turnout in their parent group meetings of Spanish speaking parents. That could be another place to start. I'm not sure how else to encourage people to attend a school board meeting.
Well, please take this the right way. If we don't have anybody that needs this service, we shouldn't spend $6,800 on it. But we do, and if people are going to call in and our looks like we're going to be on Zoom for a while, if our Hispanic numbers are up, well, then we need to continue this service. I would lean towards, asking Inez, being, if it's not efficient, though, it's not efficient. It's got to be efficient, out there for how it's working. I mean, that's quite a bit of money we're spending. It should be at least efficient. But I would vote to go a couple more months just to get some data on it to see, who's participating. But the bigger question I still think is getting out to more people in English and Spanish across the community. I don't know how to do that, but Luke Neff would. He's a genius. So that was a joke, but I'm just like,
all muted.
Joe got it. I saw it. I think we should continue it though, you guys, just because even if one person calls in, if you've traveled at all in a foreign country and you are stuck, you're stuck, to not understanding what's being said on a sign compared to what's being said in front of you. So I vote to keep it going, but let's find out the real data. But again, I'd still like to get this out to more people that speak English or speak Spanish or whatever. We'll all be more famous for it. So there you go.
So Joe, is there a way to get data on this? Because my understanding is there's just no way to know how many people are using this service.
Well, I know we have the number of views we have on our YouTube, and I don't know if we can, and I'll have to go back and see if we can actually figure out if they choose different audio channels within that. So if they watch them, I don't know if that's possible. No, Greg, he's giving me the no.
Do not stream to YouTube. Only the English channel streams to YouTube.
Okay.
The only way that we could measure would be either if people choose to give us feedback that they listened and this was helpful, or we can see the attendees who are there. And I mean, I don't know how we would know if they're using Spanish or not. Like, we would have to make educated guesses based on, we know specifically who these people are, and
right.
We don't know this many, and perhaps they were using it. That would be the only way.
Yeah.
Is it something, Joe, is it something we can ask at the Latinx parent meeting for feedback?
Yes, absolutely. I think that would be a great place to at least start with, to get information. There are 2 points also. I was just looking at view numbers. In one of our last meetings, I think we had 88 views, and in contrast, the city council had 6 views. So they were doing better than the city council to get out, Dave. I will take a win on that one. I'm not competitive in any way, but if I were competitive, I would say we're doing a better job. There's that. The second part of that is that providing access is also about making a signal and making a statement. And I think that's, one of the things that we put into our bond was about around ADA, not necessarily compliance, but creating access. So I have actually yet to receive an email thanking me for our opening door that we have at 3 of our buildings that allow people with a wheelchair to get in to have easy access. So I don't get emails on that either. I might get one if we don't have it available. And that's, usually if there's not a problem, you don't hear anything. And if there's a problem, you hear everything. So I think it is important for us to remember that and I would like to, and if we can figure out ways to do data, I'm all for it, because I actually like that too. I do also agree with Dave that we're probably not doing as good a job in outreach as we need to do to get people involved and listening, because the decisions made here affect all the children in the district. So I think that's really important. But by providing access, or by having that, you're also providing a signal that people belong. And so for my money at the 6,000 or 7,000, it's a really easy expenditure to just say, we're signaling to you that we want you to be here. If you're not coming, I want to know why you're not coming. I understand it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but there are some things that do truly affect your children. And so even if we get a couple of people who then communicate to their friends, this is what happened to the board meeting. I know that's what we have going on now. We don't have 300 parents connected, but I know we have a few parents connected who will talk to other parents. And so how is it we can get a few people to come? And so I think by offering that service, you're giving a signal that you want them to feel included, and then you want to get their feedback. So I think we've got a few things in play here, and I would certainly support going forward. We take it out of my budget if we need to, because I usually just buy pens and stickies. So I'd like to at least continue on for a while to see how we do it, and then do a better job. I would agree that we need to do a better job getting out to people and getting them to be engaged, at least just to put it on, let it stream while they're making dinner or something else. So
I've been missing my incredible amount of outreach that I did around the bond. It feels like I have no evening meetings. Right. So I would love to do some outreach on this. Yeah. And just those 2 ideas. But if board members or staff or anyone in the public has ideas, additional ideas on how we could potentially do outreach on this, please reach out and let us know. In the meantime, I think it's important to keep it, because we've only had it for a couple of months, and I don't think that's long enough to really get the information out and to get people potentially engaged. And I agree with Joe, and you know, it's eliminating another barrier to access.
Yep.
Okay, well, I would entertain a motion on this if anybody would be in the mood to give one.
I recommend that, I move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors approve hiring Proprio to provide simultaneous Spanish translation board meetings through the end of the 2020-21 school year.
I'll second that.
Beat me, Bob.
You've been fascinated too. All right, with a motion and second, is there more discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand.
I think it was somebody.
Oh, sorry, Brian, did you have something?
Yeah, so do we have a plan for collecting data? Because I understand it's only 6,000 a year, but you run that out 5 years and we're talking $30,000 and it ends up being real taxpayer money. And like Inez said, if we're not getting anything out of it, I'll bet there's a lot of things we could do in our community that would be more helpful than this for $30,000 over the next 5 years. So I want data at least, and I don't want to move forward on continuing this unless we know we're going to get some sort of data that we can judge out of it.
Do you have a suggestion for getting the data or anything you'd like to see specifically or how to get it?
No, and that's the problem in my book is we have no way of getting data on if anyone's using it. All the anecdotal evidence just based on meeting participation and feedback is that no one is currently getting any benefit out of this service that we're spending real money on.
Well, I would disagree because I know at least my aunts and other relatives have used it. Maybe they're not on every week or every time that we meet, and that's where I got the information of like, maybe you should listen in and see that what you all are saying is actually the message is being heard, because either there's a connectivity issue or something, because a lot is missing. And that's why I brought that up. I don't think we should get rid of this access.
I certainly would like to, I'll vote to approve this eagerly. You know, I think pursuing, you know, how to make this more effective, you know, we haven't yet, you know, we got a note at the beginning of the meeting from our translator asking us to slow down. You know, we haven't yet had a conversation, even informally, with our translation service on what's working for them, what's not working for them, how we can assist. I think there's a lot of growth that is yet to come for this service, but absolutely, I see it having already a huge value in providing that welcoming for anybody who wants to come to our meetings. You know, we're not approving a 5-year contract, so if we got to $30,000 and we didn't have anything to show for it, yeah, that would be legitimate to question whether we were spending folks' tax money correctly. We're not at that point. We're not even close to that point, and we have a lot of room for growth. And it's something which I can tell you, as just one board member, not speaking for the board, I will be active and engaged in making it as effective as we can possibly make it for all of our members of our community.
Thank you, Bob, for bringing that up, because I do want to highlight how difficult it is to translate simultaneously, or even after one is speaking. I actually had to do that for our committee meeting, and I hadn't done it in a while, so I was really rusty. So it takes a lot of skill to do this, and I think it's important that we hear from our translating service what we can do better, because it is important for people to talk slow in order for us to translate adequately.
I'm wondering how we can administratively give this the problem of effectiveness, give it somebody, you know, somebody responsible for it. We do have the equity committee. It's an ad hoc committee. It's certainly could be arguably within its purview to do to take pay attention to this part of the equity of access to our district's business. So that would be one option, is to ask the equity committee sometime along here even to come up with a plan at least for how to monitor this for effectiveness. I don't know, there might be better ideas, but that's just one that's occurred to me this evening.
And I was going to say, you know, and if that's something that the committee wants to take on, fantastic. You know, I certainly would volunteer to help be a liaison between, you know, the board and our translation service to try and, you know, foster that discussion on how we could be more effective. So, you know, we're getting down into the weeds of, you know, how we'll do this, and the discussion tonight is whether we're going to do it. And I would absolutely say that it's something that's money well spent.
I feel that we need to continue until the end of the school year to give it a good shot, to be able to encourage the use from families, to get it well known, and then we can come to a better decision. I don't feel it's would be a waste of money at all to encourage accessibility.
Okay, is there any
concern is that we don't have a plan for evaluating this at the end of that period. And we need that plan to be in place before I'm willing to spend taxpayer money on it. Because otherwise we're going to get to the end of this year and we will have the exact same discussion that we had here tonight with nothing to base a decision around.
That would be an unfortunate outcome. We can't get to the end of the year without continuing it. So I think we need to vote for continuing it tonight. I'm willing to bring it up to the equity committee as to whether they would be willing to put this into part of their work. Because it is a district level, it's our work. This is not something down at the level of staff. So it's really in our lane to talk about this. And that's where that equity committee, or the board's equity committee, is going to be focusing, is on sort of district level issues. So we're going to have to, I think we're going to go ahead and have a vote on this. And Brian, I'm sorry if you feel like we're premature, but I think what you've asked for is you've gotten just about as much as you can have tonight, which is to have people talking about how they're going to figure out a way to evaluate this and make sure it's effective.
So part of that could be just asking people too, right, guys, through the equity committee or through each school, just asking all of our constituents or parents, just to, we do surveys. It'd be nice to, because they might have a great idea to do it better. They might come up with something that we're not talking about here that we could be more effective. So, I mean, Brian brings up good points. We do need to know how effective it is. So I think probably the easiest thing that would take a little bit of time though is asking people. We won't be able to get to every single household, but our whole communication as a board, again, it kind of comes to that bigger question is maybe there's some people out there, whether it's Spanish or English, that might have a better way for us to do this. Let's ask them.
Yep, I agree.
I think a more financially responsible approach to this problem, and I agree that access is important, is the same way we handle sign language. If you request it, we will pay for the service for the next meeting. But to have it just auto running on autopilot and us throwing away $260 every meeting seems like a waste of money.
Well, and I actually think that if there are other languages that we need to have this available in, we should, period, for access.
I would support that on a as need basis. Absolutely.
Well, there's not 20% or so or 25% of our constituency that needs sign language. I think it's probably at least as efficient in all the senses of efficiency, not just financial, to have it as a standard offer for a population that big. And which we've documented, we have groups already organized who are trying to you know, the Latinx group, for example. So yeah, that is an alternative model. And at some point, we'll have to make a decision as to whether the continuous operation is appropriate or not. It would be impossible to know that if we suspend it now. So I think we need to keep it going.
Okay, well, we do have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion that would further the conversation?
Brandy, last thing is Greg can monitor how many people log in, right?
Yeah, you can see it too. I think if you click down at participants.
It changes throughout the meeting. It doesn't store that. So it's only when I look up and see it. I have no way of accessing how many total people watched at the end.
Okay. But that's just going to be a general check-in. It's not a by language thing or anything like that.
No, yeah. Okay, with a motion and a second, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? Okay, passes 6-1 with Director Shannon in opposition. And we've got some work to do around that outreach, it sounds like, which is exciting. Okay, now we'll go ahead and move into our policies. By the way, does anybody need a break? Is everyone feeling okay? Okay, let's go into policies. Policy ACB, all students belong. And Director Mock is going to remind us what this is because he is a member of the policy committee.
Yeah, this is the one about that was originated for us by the Oregon Department of Education and has been referred to us for adoption. We are essentially required to adopt ACB by the state. It's now a state rule. We have the option of, I think, tweaking it to make it to add things to it, but there's a certain element that's in the rule from the state. And that has to do with basically I think the meat of that is in the definition of a bias incident and the symbol of hate, and that these things would not be permitted on the school district grounds. We had a conversation last time about this, including some question about the constitutionality of a speech-based rule that would prohibit some and encourage others. Not encourage others, but I got distracted there. Prohibit some forms of speech, including the 3 symbols that are listed on the policy right now: the noose, the swastika, and the Confederate flag. And we had some conversation last time about whether that list of symbols would tend to grow and become more controversial as time passes. I think that's where we left it. I'll say one thing more. Last time I did raise the notion that this kind of policy is the kind of thing that could get challenged in courts as free speech grounds. I want to make it clear that I said I was going to vote for this anyway, even if it might be controversial, because at least as it is now, I think it is on target and constitutional. But that question can come up. People have legitimate arguments about free speech that impact this. I think what we're talking about today, I don't know for sure what everybody wants to talk about, but at least whether we're ready to go ahead and prove it on second reading. That's officially what it's up for.
So Ron, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Look, I get the symbols one, those are all pretty tough ones. Working at the school, seeing the Confederate flag the most out of those 3. What's the law say right now in Oregon? I mean, what's the law say?
What's the law say about what?
About these type of symbols.
Oh, you're asking from a question you probably want to ask the district council. I'm not going to give a definitive legal decision or ruling on that. But in general, the general pattern has been that for the general population, there are relatively very few restrictions on what people can say. I mean, the classics are you can't yell fire at a crowded crowded theater because that would immediately endanger people. So the kinds of speech that stimulate immediately dangerous actions are can be regulated within the Constitution. You can't defame people. There can be civil actions against defamation. So if you defame me and told people things that weren't true about me and injured my reputation, if that's impossible, then I could possibly sue you about that. And it wouldn't be an infringement of your civil rights because you would have used your speech to infringe my civil rights. And there are a few other examples like that where they are limited for the general population. The rules are a little different for schools because, as the courts have established, and it's actually mentioned in Tinker, Des Moines, which we talked about last time. Schools have a different setting because they've got to be able to maintain an educational atmosphere that works. And so the courts have recognized rules that would be different in schools than they might be some other places based on that. That is not real clear in every case, and there are lots of lines that are still to be drawn. But the general principle is that while you don't give away your First Amendment rights when you enter the school, neither as a student or as a staff member or as a member of the public, the school can regulate your speech in order to maintain an educational environment effectively and so forth. So there are cases that use that rule to approve of school actions and cases that use that rule to say, no, you couldn't do that because it's gone too far. The school couldn't make any rule that's one way or another. So the courts have tried to use that general principle and they've not decided every case in the favor of the school district. Sometimes they've just decided in the favor of the patron or the student. And it's not, I don't know that there's anything, Oregon could have its own unique version of a First Amendment. We do have a First Amendment of our own parallel in the Oregon Constitution, and sometimes it is used in Oregon courts to make a slightly different rule in the federal courts, more protective of speech. It can't be less protective, it has to be more protective of speech. I don't know that there's anything, I don't know that there is or is not anything in Oregon. I don't know whether there's anything different in Oregon as applies to the school districts. Generally, this is all federal law.
So if a kid came to the high school and he wore a Confederate flag t-shirt and we say he can't, he says he can, not that any high school kid would ever disagree with an adult.
Never happens.
Never happened. But I mean, can we discipline him and he wins, or does he lose, or can his parents step in and say, we're going to sue the Newberg school district? I mean, I don't want a kid to wear the Confederate flag t-shirt to school, but if he did, and he says, if he's defiant, which no high school kid would ever be defiant, but if he did, where could that go to?
Well, they certainly could sue no matter what we do. It would be the kind of claim, it's not going to get thrown out of the court immediately. There'd be fact issues and so forth. So yeah, you could have lawsuits about it. And in this case, they'd be protesting what's basically an Oregon state law that we would also have in our policy. I don't know, Joe has more experience probably as to what happens in those cases and what the reality is. But in terms of whether he has the right to sue, sure, he has the right to sue. Not that he has a right to win, but he has a right to sue.
Right. And that
Go ahead. Would it be similar to just a dress code violation where, when I was going to school and if I had spaghetti straps, I was forced to wear my gym t-shirt instead of whatever shirt I was wearing?
That's correct.
So that's what it would seem to me that we would just tell the student to change.
Right, and that's, I think actually one of our speakers tonight, one of our commenters tonight did talk about, the bigger about having a discussion about what it looks like. Let's say, and Dave is correct, I'm sure it probably never happens, but let's just say somebody's defiant, a student's defiant toward an adult. You could get to a place where you then have to have them go home. But more often than not, we have people who show up with alcohol on their t-shirt or drugs, or other vulgar or lewd or obscene or just plainly offensive speech on their clothing. We have them turn it inside out. We give them a different shirt. You're now, you get your tiger shirt on today or whatever. So this happens all the time in kind of different contexts. And those are all limitations that have been supported by the Supreme Court for years and years around student speech. So certain things are that way. So we would probably approach it in the same way. It's not like we're going to kick you out of school because you show up with when you show up with a patch. We're going to take you through a conversation. We're going to get you to change it, do all the rest of those things. But really, I think there's also some learning, some empathy about what it may not be your intent, but what the impact is. I think that we often forget that there is an impact. It may not impact any of you. It might have been your favorite 70s TV show when you were a kid and they drove an orange car that had that on there, and you didn't even track the fact that symbol on that car was about something else. It was really about two knuckleheads who drove around and tried to escape from the law. You enjoyed the TV show, but it has a different impact if it's somebody else. And so I think that's back to this thing. It's about the kind of impact. I think you heard it tonight from one of our staff, Matt Miller, talked about it happening specifically in his classroom and the impact that it had on the students. And so when we come back to the core part of this was that students across the state have asked for this. They have put in some work to make it happen. And the policy being born of the administrative rule, temporary rule they've got in, is really just speaking and affirming that certain things have impact that make it really hard for some students to go to school. And I think we're working through it. Of course, there's a policy, there's a procedure that we'll follow, which is an AR, to go through a bias procedure, because we did talk about having a complaint procedure and using the same one, so we wouldn't have to have multiple. But there are some differences when it comes to hate speech and this kind of an activity. So they've actually got a bias thing that we'll bring forward and we can review as well about what the steps are for remediating it.
So what is the range of potential punishments or remediation techniques for a bias incident under this?
Sure. Well, we don't have it fully developed yet, but it's the same thing as we have for dress code. So either we ask you to change it, we maybe even negotiate a conversation. Dave actually talked about several meetings ago that sometimes you would just have kids just sit down and talk it out. Like, what does this mean to you? How does this work? We're not in the business of trying to create massive discipline. We don't want to put you out of school. We don't want to put you in those things. We want you to understand the impact that your actions have, because we're trying to help develop young adults. If it gets to a whole other place and they can just continue, then we figure out the next disciplinary parts of it. But it's probably nothing more than, if you look at, I'll go back. I'm glad that Ines brought it up with dress code. It's the same kind of a thing we do with dress code, right? And we have a certain set of warnings, and we go through the process and try to work through you. I don't think that we're going to find a huge amount of that happening. I think we've actually spoken a little bit about some of the ones that have come in. I think, and we'll bring forward as soon as we've developed the AR that goes along with this policy to go over, and you can kind of see the process we'd go through. But we would still follow the same code of conduct things that we have right now, just for the kinds of activities that are in school. This would just add on to the kinds of things that we already limit.
Joe, I didn't want to cut you off, but my question was actually around the language of a bias incident, which is when there's an expression of animus towards a group based on certain traits. That's not where you can take their t-shirt off and turn it inside out. So if a person expresses that they feel a certain way towards another group, how do you deal with that?
So again, it's all in context about what the procedure is. So let's just say that they somebody decides to use the N-word directed at somebody else. That would follow the same kind of procedure that we would use if they were to use some other kind of thing against somebody. So the animus may not be bias specifically, but it could be, I'm trying to think about something else they would use. Let's just say they use the F word in multiple ways and actually threatening somebody, threatening some kind of harm. We would go through a same procedure that we would normally do. We would investigate, we'd ask the kids what's happening, get the context, and then it would just depend on, it could be a suspension, it could be an expulsion if it were really truly that horrible. I don't see us quite getting to that, but it is possible But we have a tiered set of disciplinary procedures that we would follow along. A bias incident would just fall into that same kind of a thing. So we would put that into our code of conduct along whatever that continuum is. And I'm not sure where we would place it. I don't have it in front of me right this second, but
Hey, Joe,
it would, yeah.
to what Brian just said there. I've been part of hundreds of the F-bomb ones, at the school. That kind of happens, pretty much every day. We don't catch, them all, obviously. Like the shirt thing is easy. We've done that for the dress code forever. The noose, the swastika, the Confederate flag, inappropriate. Those are the easy ones. The bias ones are, it's gonna be hard for everybody to hear this, but all of our examples so far have been one way, and I mean that in a truest sense. It's always a white student towards somebody else. That's what our examples have been tonight and so far. So I just know in my time at the school, it goes every which way. And so my only thing on the bias part is who defines that at the end of the day. Being around the high school kids and working a lot with middle school kids, there's so many times where they're mad at each other over boys, girls, sports, who made the team, who's doing what. I mean, there's a lot of immaturity. And then there's a lot of maturity. I mean, high school kids are capable of the full range. But when it comes to that part where they're, if somebody's being the accuser and somebody's being the accused, and I bring this up because it's been kind of personal to me this summer as we've gone through this whole summer. I mean, we've had people on our staff in this district call me a racist, and I'm not a racist, but they think they have a viewpoint of what a racist is today now based on the 2020 difference of things. And I'm just saying, if a student, either way, I mean, I've dealt with this my entire time, and I do not put up with kids treating any other kind of kid in a harmful way in any way, shape, or form. Always stuck up for every single kid. That's what I want to see. I just don't want to see. Our principals are always the last to know because it happens. Security, a teacher, a coach, somebody drags them into the office and says, this is what happened. You fill out an incident report form. And what's going to happen though on a he said, she said, because that can happen super easy in school. And to me, it's like when you do set kids down and we do the conflict resolution and we go through the whole process with the kids, it works really well. Like the young man said from Catalyst, when you sit down at the end of the day and you talk it through, it's the best way to do that. As long as our students just know that it's not all of our students, that's why I said this a couple months ago. The first thing I'm doing when we're back in schools, I'm having a school assembly talking to every single kid in that school saying, this is how you treat another human being correctly. And I hope our principals would do that. And especially now coming out of what we're coming out of, this is really important to me. So I hope I'm getting through to you guys.
Yeah.
I spent my entire career trying to do this for kids, and I want every kid to feel safe and important, but there's going to be times where the most awful things are said in those hallways, and it's not directed at somebody sometimes, and sometimes it's totally directed at somebody, but it goes from all students to everybody. There's nobody that's completely innocent in this. And so I'm just curious, like if a principal has it sitting at the end of the day between two kids and there's no, like one kid's word to another kid's word, how is this going to pan out for every kid? Because every kid deserves his time, to feel safe there.
Well, notice that in I think I'm actually glad you brought that up. There are 2 points that I want to make. Number one, the Bias Institute doesn't talk about any specific race one to another. So if you read that paragraph, it says animus, and Brian quoted it earlier, animus toward another person relating to the person's perceived race, color, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, national origin. It doesn't say which one is right or wrong. It doesn't say which direction. It just says a bias incident. And then the second part of that, I think that it's probably the case of why we've only brought up certain things about race going one direction, is that everybody that has spoken so far, minus one person on our board, is white. And so I think we take it from our own perspective. I'm just as guilty, because those are the examples that first came to mind, because that's what I think of. Because but I think that if you were to look at this, if you back up a little bit and look at the policy, and you say, and the paragraph right before that one in this policy also says that all visitors, all students, all employees are entitled to participate in an environment that's free from discrimination or harassment based on perceived race, color, religion, and the whole list. So it doesn't say which way is correct. And I do know that people say things to each other going, I'll call it both directions, but it is important to remember that this is about the hostile expression of animus toward another person based on these other things. And so everybody can be wrong at any time. And I think that that's back to the working with students to have a conversation about it. Sometimes that's the most important thing that can happen, because you're going to go through and understand the impact that your words have on somebody else. So I think that the policy is wide open enough in that kind of a thing, especially when exactly the examples you brought up, Dave, about making sure that this is for all students. And I would agree, it is for all students. We're supposed to have a place where all students belong, and that means we're going to have some tough conversations about things.
Well, probably never before coming out of what we came through this year, and we're not out of it yet. Kids are going to walk back into a tough situation in a lot of different ways for school, not just being back in a classroom and having to sit down and not have their cereal while they're listening to a lesson. They're going to have to get up early, and they're going to have to eat school lunches again, and they're going to do all that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be a tough time for them coming back out of this political climate we're still in. And how's that going to? I think that's where I'd like to know how all the principals are going to react to this. I know they have to do what you tell them, and I know Tammy at the high school does a great job on this kind of stuff. So as we come back to a different school year, Joe, Dr. Morlock, as we're coming back out of that into a different time when we do get back, whenever we do, and these kids are in person, some of these issues start to happen. I'd like to have feedback back down the road from those principals saying, hey, this resolution didn't go far enough. It went too far. What's going to be the results of this? Same thing Brian said about our data points on the language thing. I'd like our principals to come back and say, because it's going to be a different year for those principals and the kids than ever before.
Yeah, I would. So I apologize for cutting off in the middle. I would actually. So I fully agree. I think one of the things we're going to be coming back to is being back in a building with a whole lot of other humans, and we're going to have to kind of relearn some of those muscles, right? Because we're sort of used to doing the scene, how to surf the hallway, how to get to your place, how to kind of interact. So there will be some relearning. I totally agree with that. The second point that I like to make is that when I first started here 2.5 years ago, I think it was, this is one of the hot topics that came to me from our secondary principals. This is something they wanted us to change already in policy, because they were struggling with symbols of hate coming in. And this is something that they actually had been pressing on us to move ahead with. And so it's really, I would be, I actually would gladly have our principals kind of come back and talk about all the things about reopening school. And I agree. I think we'll still be in some political thing. I think we're going to get through some of the politics by the time we're all back in person. I think some of that heat will cool down a bit before we get back in. But we are going to have to relearn how to be with each other in shared spaces, kind of with a new reality. And so I think I totally agree with you on that side of things. And I think that this just allows us to kind of name the things that are bias, incident, and symbols of hate, and make it very clear about what we tolerate, what we don't tolerate. And then, how we discipline and how we move forward and how we help kids learn to be functional humans with each other, whether they like each other or not. I think that's the big next step. So I think you're right on, Dave, in a lot of those points, frankly. and I think we have a lot of work to do. But this policy allows us to develop then other procedures and other ways for us to be able to work through the challenges that'll come forward as we come back together, and even when we're not together. I mean, the incident you heard about tonight from Matt Miller was something that happened as we are remote, and so it's these things do happen, and we need to work on them.
Joe, last thing on that, before I know somebody else wants to talk, and I'm sorry, but I just want to say I have a lot more. This was a tough one to read through for me, just because of working in there and seeing all this stuff. And I know Matt, I mean, he's down there building good stuff. What a horrible classroom. Sorry I had to go through that. If I vote for this, though, I want you to come back to me as a board member and give us updates on this to tell us how it's going and what's going on. It just can't be an open-ended thing. It's like, is this enough or is it not enough, or are we going in the wrong direction? I think, for me, I haven't asked you to do very many specific things, but that would be one I would ask, like, how's it going at Mountain View compared to CV, compared to the high school, compared to the grade schools, compared to, Catalyst, how's this going? Every now and then in your comments, I'd like you to come back and say, pretty good or whatever.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm ready to make a motion. So I'll move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors approve policy ACB, all students belong, as presented.
I'll second.
Oh, Rebecca, you got the last one, so this one I think should go to Bob.
Okay.
Of seconds. Okay, motion and a second. Further discussion. And Dave, great questions, good conversation, but let's see if anybody else has any questions or thoughts for just a little bit here.
So on symbols of hate, am I reading this correct? That it is not that we're just banning the noose, the swastika, and the Confederate flag. We're banning symbols of hate, which include those three things. Am I reading that correctly? So
Correct.
Who defines what a symbol of hate is?
So if you were to have a lawsuit about this, you would be asking the trier of fact, might be a jury, sometimes it's a judge, to decide whether the display was reasonably likely to cause a substantial disruption, the first clause there, or reasonably likely to interfere with the rights of a student by denying them full access. And we don't, so the way that, officially the way the law works is that these criteria become questions of fact for a trier of fact in a lawsuit. We're not going to want to take every case to court. So what's going to happen, I think, and Joel will have to comment more on this, stop people trying to make that determination based on those two criteria.
Yep, that's exactly correct.
Okay.
The Tinker case was specifically around black armbands protesting the war. And that's why in that case, it was not considered a symbol of hate, which is why that case is interesting. Used the other direction because they said the school district couldn't ban them because it wasn't something that was creating immediate harm or other kinds of discomfort and interrupting the school environment.
And in that case, one of the things they cited was that some students were wearing iron crosses, which is traditionally a symbol of Nazism, which I assume would be covered under this rule. So the thing the Supreme Court used as an example of why you can't ban armbands is one of the things that we would be outlining under this policy.
Well, this is not about the Iron Cross. The Iron Cross is not listed, just the swastika. The Iron Cross has a lot more connotations than the swastika does. Although the swastika had other connotations too, which probably, had the Nazis not come along, would mean that the swastika wouldn't bother us. But the Iron Cross does have other connotations. And and the question would be, how you're pointing to a problem that will occur eventually in this, and then we're going to get to borderline cases. And I don't think the Iron Cross is a borderline case at this point, but maybe at some point it will become one. But the case in Tinker would be, there'd still be a distinction between the Iron Cross and swastika.
Joe, would an iron cross be considered a symbol of hate in our district resolution?
Does the Iron Cross include the swastika?
No, just the Iron Cross.
Because so in Germany, as an example, right, it's illegal to create them with the swastika on them, but they do actually have the Iron Cross. And so they're not used necessarily in that way. So again, is it being used as a way to intimidate somebody else, or are they just wearing the Iron Cross?
That seems incredibly subjective. I don't know how you would make that determination.
Right, and that's why the conversation usually happens. You can see the Iron Cross used in, and I can't remember the skateboard brand, and somebody's going to tell me later what it is, but as part of the logo of a skateboard brand, as a for instance, and you can see that symbology being used. So at this point, I don't think that's going to be covered under this. There are, of course, Iron Crosses that have the swastika in them, but at this point, it's not one of the things that we would consider to be used as a symbol of hate necessarily.
So does context matter on the swastika? Because the swastika is a 5,000-year-old symbol that's still sacred to Hindus and Buddhists. So would a Hindu or Buddhist student be able to wear a piece of religious garb in our school that included a swastika under this policy?
I think the swastika and the Iron Cross are two very different things.
Well, I'm asking specifically about the swastika.
Well, the swastika, I think we would be banning because it has an unfortunate too deep of a connotation within our culture.
So
the swastika is also specifically called out in the policy.
So a Buddhist or Hindu student cannot wear a religious symbol at school if it's the swastika. Is that?
If it were something that are going to disrupt the educational environment, then yes, that's correct.
Okay. Back to my questioning about bias incidents. I noticed that in your response, you used the example of someone who was threatening someone with harm, which of course has been held by the Supreme Court to not be free speech. So an expression of animus saying, I don't like somebody or I don't like this group is not threatening them. Yet under this policy, that would not be allowed, correct?
You mean they couldn't say something bad to somebody else?
That they couldn't say, student A says, I don't like this race. I don't trust people of this race. I don't like people of this race. Is that a hostile expression of animus under this policy?
Well, I think context matters, but I don't think they're saying it directly to that person. They're saying in general, I don't like this because of X, Y, or Z. Now, if they're saying it in ways that they are continuing to say it over and over again, and they continue to say it over and over again because they're using it as a way to bully or to create some kind of a disruption in the educational environment, then yes, then they would be going through a disciplinary procedure because they would be using that as a way to make somebody else feel less welcome, make them feel less comfortable, create some other kind of an incident in the educational environment. And it's not always the exact words you use. It has to do with the intent and then the impact of those words.
So if they say it one time, it's okay.
I'm not going to go back and forth on this one. It could be one time they say it really badly. It could be one time they say it accidentally. I mean, there could be 1,000 ways to do it. Again, that's why we have administrators that go through and have conversations with students. And sometimes there is a larger impact to that student's educational experience, and sometimes there's less of one, depending upon. And that's why people spend those times doing those things. I think Dave actually spoke earlier about the conversations he's had with students when he sits them down and they go through to find out what was meant by that person saying it. And I think that there are always issues of the he said, she said, but context does matter. And I do know that our secondary administrators, especially secondary administrators, go through this all the time, and they go after what was the impact, what was the intended impact on this? Were you just being a knucklehead kid and you said the word because you were listening to a rap song, or were you trying to create some sort of fear in somebody else?
I can speak. I do know of a case where something like that happened because the kid was a knucklehead, and he got called in the office and he got written up, but because basically he had used the N-word actually, and but he was treated fairly by the district. So I'm sure you understand that is possible. I have a question for you, Brian. Is it acceptable for someone to intimidate somebody so they feel afraid to come to school?
No.
And if we have evidence that the three of these things have a pattern of intimidating people so they don't come to school, which is basically what we're basing this on, is evidence that we're supposed to have.
Okay, I'm going to need you to define intimidating though.
Well, I don't know why we need to define intimidate. The principle is that it's not, you don't have a right to intimidate somebody so they don't come to school. And once you establish that principle, then you always have borderline cases. The fact that there are borderline cases does not undermine the attempt to, in fact, assert a principle. Well, how much intimidation? Obviously, if you have a gang of 5 guys and there's the 90-pound ninth grader hasn't grown yet, and those 5 guys say, you better not come to school today or something bad's going to happen to you, we could stop that. What if there's only 3 guys? What if there's only 1 guy and he's only 5 pounds heavier? At this point, now you're getting to borderline cases. And you're not going to stop the 5 guys. You're not going to allow the 5 guys to do it just because you can't decide what to do about the 2 guys who are the same size. You establish the principle, and you're always going to have borderline cases. The fact that you're focusing on borderline cases, I'm not sure if you're objecting to the principle or not.
I'm trying to figure out where the line is, because saying that someone cannot express animus towards.
And tell me what the line is on the 5 guys. Where's the line on general intimidation? If we can't define the line in advance, we can't have any policy.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to understand this policy, which I thought was our job.
Yes, it is our job. But I think, in my view, we already have established the understanding of the policy, that there are going to be clear cases that this is directed at, and there are going to be borderline cases. I said that last time. The borderline cases are going to be a problem. I said that last time. That doesn't stop us from establishing the principle in a matter like this, because it does. There's not going to be able to articulate any principle that does anything that doesn't have borderline cases. I don't know what else you understand.
But when you're dealing with restricting Americans' constitutional rights, I think we need to know where that line is.
No, we can't. I've said this several times, Brian. We don't know, and it always comes out in the cases. When they said Congress shall make no law infringing the I can't quote it. That's a little embarrassing. Congress shall make no law respecting establishment of religion or infringing.
It's a long amendment. I understand what you're saying.
Anyway, all those are fundamental principles which I deeply believe in, and I think they're fundamental to what America is and its promise. But nobody knew at the time, even at the time, what the borderline cases would come out.
Sure, and we've had a lot of Supreme Court cases in the meantime, and I'm trying to understand how this policy fits into the framework that the Supreme Court has given us, and in my view, it doesn't, because saying that you dislike somebody, even on account of race or religion or whatever, which I find abhorrent, that is protected speech under our Constitution.
It's not. For the general population, it is, but not within school.
Could I have a question, please?
Yeah, I'm going to let Bob go ahead and ask the question and see if Rebecca and Inez have anything to add to this, and then I think we should take the vote.
What I was going to ask it, and kind of in the similar vein, is I'm not clear, Brian, if you're trying to understand the policy or if you're trying to persuade folks to your side of disagreeing with the policy. If your goal is to understand the policy, I think we can continue. I would be more than willing to help you understand it. If you're trying to persuade me, I don't find your argument persuasive, and I'd like to move on.
I would like to add that to, what Brian's trying to say, though, is.
Hey, Dave, I'm sorry.
No, I don't want to be interrupted, Brandy. I want to.
I know, Dave. Here's what I'm going to let you know. I want to let Rebecca and Inez have the chance to speak, and then we can come back to you, okay? We need to ensure that all board members have at least a chance, and I know that you and Brian are passionate about this issue and have had quite a bit of time to speak, so I will come right back to you after we get to Rebecca and Inez. Rebecca, do you have anything to add to this or any questions?
I feel that it's important. The policy is clear enough, and I think we should go ahead and vote on it. I don't find it a violation of free speech. I feel it's a defining what the students can and can't do at school, and that we know there will be staff and administration to help the students learn how to respond in cases of biasness or hate speech. We need to teach them how to work through their issues.
Inez, do you have anything to add?
Just that I think this is in line with what we've discussed our goals to be for the year, and with our resolution that we passed. I don't see a problem with this. I'm ready to move forward, which is why I moved and made the motion.
Great. Dave, final thoughts?
I think when you guys don't want to hear somebody talk, you dismiss them. And whether I agree with Brian or not, it's like, this has happened too many times. And his questions are valid. And he's not trying to argue over certain things, but you know, we're talking about a major league issue here, and he has good concerns. And Ron, I talked to you about this. The dismissal of somebody on our board, and you just decide you don't want to hear anymore, and you guys just want to move forward with a vote. I think that's frustrating when you're on the board and you. I don't hear Brian say he has said over and over in his comments that he is against treating people poorly in every sense of the word. He has said that several times tonight, and yet you guys still are dismissing one of our board members for having his opinion because
Dave,
it doesn't align with you.
Dave, I'll say there's a big difference between disagreeing and dismissing. You know, Brian's made his point. He's made it very strongly and very effectively. I don't agree with it, and that's different than dismissing it. Dismissing means I'm not even going to listen to you, and I don't think your thoughts are worthy or valid. I have not said that, and I don't feel that in my heart. I have listened to Brian. I've listened to you. I've listened to the rest of the board. I've taken that and I've processed that, and I've come to a decision. And if Brian, as I said, if he had trouble, if you have trouble understanding the policy, that's a discussion to continue having. If you just disagree with it, then we're in opposition. That's different than dismissing.
You're dismissing from the standpoint that you want to just go ahead and vote right now. And if we vote right now, this is what happens. Because trust me, I understand the no vote real well. If we go ahead and vote right now, because we just want to get it done, got to get her done, then you're going to get calls from constituents. You're going to get emails from constituents. Dr. Joe and the school board gets emails from constituents hammering away because of a no vote. And again, Brian has brought up several good points. I don't believe he's trying to dissuade me on my vote, yes or no. He's just bringing up points, and you are dismissing him. I will tell you how it works. I will show you what's up. You guys have said that. And he's not arguing with you over how we want to treat our kids.
Who said that?
It's been said in the last like half hour.
Nobody did.
By who?
Who said that?
You guys
right.
Just a second. I think Dave's accusing me of saying that. And
no, I'm not saying that. I said you guys are just. When Brian talks, you guys are not listening to everything he's saying on this thing. At least if the vote is 4-3 or 6-7-0 or whatever it is, he's still sitting here because I've felt the same way he's feeling right now. Is that let's just move on and be done, because obviously, you know, like Bob, you don't agree with it, and that's fine. You get your vote, and Brian gets his vote, and I get mine, and so on. Okay. My point right now is the fact that we still have a board member who's passionately trying to make a point, and it's hard to do on this school board. It's really hard to do that, and because we just want to push ahead to a vote, and for me personally, this is a really important issue, and it's a big issue. And yet it's like a lot of things on our school board, we get to a certain point where we've made up our mind and we're just going to vote. Let's go. Let's get it.
Okay, Dave, I'm going to remind you, it's a business meeting conducted in public, and we have an agenda with times to facilitate the ease of the meeting. And Brian emailed these concerns ahead of time, which was excellent because it was great communication. We were able to know that these concerns were some of the ones that he was having. Come prepared to the meeting to address them. We have talked about this for far longer than what was actually in the agenda, which was convenient because we were ahead in our schedule. So that's excellent. The whole point of this is to have good conversation, which we've had, but it is not to have endless conversation. And there's a motion and a second. We've had discussion. I have asked repeatedly if there's further discussion that will move the conversation along. And at this point, it feels that we're getting off topic and talking about issues that you have within relationships on the board. And again, I will encourage you to reach out, have dialogue, meet with board members. Beyond that, we cannot
Not at all. I am trying to
out.
stick up for a fellow board member right now who's not being heard. That's what
I have heard Brian loud and clear, and I think everyone on this board has.
Randy,
Dave.
I just want to mention why I moved to vote is because I am being conscious of time, and we've been talking about this for a while. I understand that Brian has concerns, and that's okay. Like, for him to bring them up, we've heard them. I've heard them. Still's not going to change my vote. My vote is still going to be to support this, which is why I moved to vote. And if moving this to a vote is me dismissing him, I guess I'm sorry for that, but my job is to do my best, and my best is to do what's best for the only resources we have, which are energy, time, and attention. And how are we spending that? You know, we don't get paid for this. This is volunteer, and yet we have to make these decisions for the betterment of the students and everybody involved. And us wasting time talking in circles is not going to be effective in any way.
And as whenever you have something to say about one of your topics, you have no problem going on and on about it. So why can't
Dave, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm not going to let you disparage other board members. At this point, we have a motion and a second. We have spoke about this for far longer than was originally allocated. I'm going to call the vote.
That you give us
All those in favor.
bridging
Brian.
constitutional rights.
No,
Point of order. Point of order.
I know. I'm going to ask for a point of order too.
Point of order. You're out of line. You're interrupting. We've had the conversation. I'm calling the vote. All those in favor, please
You
raise your
cannot
hand.
stop a board member from talking under our.
Brian, point of order.
Okay,
We're taking a 10-minute break. Please meet back here at 9:15.
Can you please tell me what rule point of order means you are referencing?
You took a break.
Brian, we're taking a break till 9:15.
I'll be out here enjoying
Hey, Rebecca,
Yes.
just so you know, your phone is not muted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Just, we could hear you breathing.
Oh, sorry.
It's not a big deal, but just so you knew you were not muted.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, it's 9:15. Dave, are you available? Let's give him another minute to return. Oh, there he is. Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. We've had ample discussion. We've had members call for a vote, including me, and it's time to vote. The motion, Director Pena moved that the Newberg School District Board of Directors approve policy ACB, all students belong, as presented. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? And abstaining. Okay, so we had passes 5-2 with Director Shannon, a no vote, and Director Brown abstaining. Final agenda item tonight is Dr. Morlock discussing policy IKAR. Are you ready?
If I hit the unmute button, I will be, yes. All right. All right, thank you. This is actually the AR that goes along with our academic achievement. We have been, of course, going through quite a challenging time for students and staff alike. And so we've had several discussions at primarily our secondary level and specifically at our high school level when it comes to credit. There are some things within the AR that we are making some switches to. I just wanted you to be aware because there are some changes. Some of these things had not been used anyway, and some of them are small differentials. So I wanted to just highlight some of those for you now. If you will look at in the policy, which is on page 66 of the packet, is where the changes were made within the policy IKAR. It's not the policy, I'm sorry, it's the administrative regulation. A couple of changes that we have made. So number one, allowing a more judicious use of the incomplete rather than an immediate failure. So we have lots of teachers. We did this in the springtime when we were working through from March through the end of the year, where students were allowed to make up an incomplete. So rather than going through having a failure, then trying to come back and change the grade out. This is something that we would, the teachers can make arrangements with the student and make a plan to doing that. If they do not then fix that at the end of the next semester, that would then revert automatically to an F, which is something that we do earlier than that. Usually we've been done 10 school days. We've changed that to the end of the following semester because we wanted to make sure that we could allow teachers to work directly with students to help them get, sometimes it's just a one or two, three things. We know it's been really hard on students, and we're trying to help or allow teachers to do more helpful things for them. So that's in the incomplete change. Under NC, that's a no credit. So if they, we may have a student who is taking a course and in the past and they do not do well on it, we can actually change those to a no credit, which makes it so it does not impact their GPA necessarily. But it does allow them to retake that class for a different grade. So they wouldn't have just an F and then the class taken again. It would be given a no credit. With all of these changes, I should have backed up and said, we did discuss the policy around folks who are applying for or who would be eligible for the valedictorian and salutatorian and determined that these would not, if these were part of that calculation, that they would not qualify to get that award at the end of the year if that were so desired. Under the pass and no pass, we, as the procedure was prior to, we had to have courses that were set up to only be pass or no pass. This allows us to actually have other courses that are pass, no pass for students, much like we had in the springtime through from March to the end of the year. And so we've added the opportunity for certain students if we need to make it into a pass, no pass situation, that we can do that. That was something that came up clearly from both our middle school and high school administrators and teachers to allow us to do that. We did remove the language on the following page, which would be page 67 in the packet, for two reasons. Number one, we tried to tinker with it. It didn't actually make as much sense, so we just removed that because one of them was about IEP, and then the other ones were about having to have them pre-marked in the course guides, which is something that we were not going to do. So we removed that language for that time period. And then we considered some other changes that we have not brought forward into the AR at this time. But some of these things, we've had lots of pleas for support from parents, from students, and from our staff members wanting to find different ways that there were some places within our administrative regulations that made it challenging for them to be able to support students in ways that just make sense. So these small changes in here will allow us to do more of that kind of support for students. We know we've already begun the discussions of what recovery looks like. We know that we're going to get through the school year. We'll have some students coming in. We're working on those plans. But we also recognize the need that we'll be looking at a long recovery window to get back. Several years of trying to get students back up to grade level, working with kids who are in danger of not graduating, students who are, kind of fighting through and having a very challenging year. So this allows our teachers and administrators some additional tools to help students kind of get past that and not be completely wiped out when they come back, as we come back full time. And I'm expecting that we would certainly do that next year as the indicators are kind of leaning that way. So I wanted you to be aware of the changes that we that I made in the administrative regulation. They still do follow the general IK policy. So we've not made any changes to that would be material in that way. I think I'll pause there and see if there are any questions related specifically to the changes that we made in IKAR.
I had a question, Joe. First, I just wanted to thank you, for finding this flexibility and bringing this to us. This is one of those things that you didn't necessarily need to bring forward, but it has a significant impact. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. My question is, are you envisioning this to be something that's just in place during distance learning, or are you picturing it in place beyond that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. At this point, we're making these changes for the current time. We're also going to then be monitoring to see what impact it has later on. And that's why I was talking about recovery. It may take us a couple of years to recover. Again, this really came from our school administrators saying that here are the things that are keeping us from moving forward in certain situations. We did have the conversation, what happens if X, Y, or Z student starts to abuse this because they're doing these other things so they can get past, so we can cross that bridge when we come to it. But at this point, we're looking at this as a kind of a short term, and then we're going to monitor how it works. And if we need to make adjustments, the good news is because it's under an AR, if this is not working, we can make that switch quickly, come back to the board, say, here, by the way, here's some of the things that didn't work in this, and we can make those adjustments. But right now, we're specifically focusing on our students in our schools right now. So that's why we're looking at doing this now. Yeah.
I appreciate you going through the work to try to create flexibility, but still make guidelines so that people aren't just out there freewheeling. The part where you say the NC can be at teacher discretion, I assume that's because we have so many different kinds of cases right now. Generally, I would not want to have teacher discretion built into the policy too much. There's got to be some room. In this situation, it seems like it might make sense. So I appreciate you guys doing that. So again, you did say that we don't know how long it's going to be that you'd want to keep these. Is there some way of sort of documenting your thoughts on that so there's guidance? Or how are you doing that? I guess that's your decision to do that. So that people.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I just want everybody, the people that have to use this, to understand how long it's going to be and why these conditions, what kinds of conditions would move us back to a more traditional model.
Right. Well, and that's which I was saying at the beginning. This is something that kind of came forward from that group. They said, here are some of our pinch points right now. We're trying to work through the system. Here's where we're running into some issues. And so it really was, we worked on it together. In fact, I assigned, I want you to figure out what that language should say, talk to your counselors, talk to your teacher, talk to your assistant principals and ask them what they think on this. So we worked on this a couple of different times. We they alerted us to the need to make some changes. We had a few meetings. As I said before, I signed out some language things. They came back with, this is what our counselors thought would work, or this is what our teachers thought would work, or this is what our administrative team thought would work. So we did do this based upon, this was not me bringing this forward to them. This was them saying, here are some of our biggest pinch points. And then we did talk about, so, the concern you've brought up, like, does this go forever? Is this just for now? I think that right now we're looking at our shorter term, because we've got to get through some of this process to help kids get through, and not penalize them for all the things they're going through. And then at the same time, they can come back and we can change it later. Okay, this is not working because it's being abused in X, Y, or Z, or this is not working because we didn't say it the right way, or gave too much flexibility, or it's too much discretion. The point about teacher discretion, it also goes, from a teacher, a counselor notices it, the registrar. So it's not just, totally unknown under the radar. It goes through a process anyway. But yeah, it's been brought forward to us from our school administrators saying, here are some of the biggest pinch points we have, so we can move forward on.
Well, that's what this AR system is for, so you can be flexible.
Right.
You can point out that NC thing is that what happens, similar situation, at least in my experience, is that the teacher starts to get a lot of pressure from people. Hey, it's your discretion. And at some point, they hey, don't give me this much discretion.
Right. Make a better rule. And we do, and that does happen. Like, we would rather just the district have a rule and then just do this, and then makes it, We think right now is the best time to be at maximum flexibility on things like this, because we've got to try to, support people all over the place.
Yeah, I'll echo Bob's statement on having flexibility. I've seen it with my own students, and feeling overwhelmed and completely underwater, and then getting a little bit of flexibility from teachers, not at the disadvantage of academic success, more in support of academic success. And I appreciate not just you doing this, Joe, but I know it's happening across the district at individual levels. Yeah. Any other questions for Joe regarding this AR? Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Well, this is the last meeting of 2020, which is kind of crazy. We don't have another meeting in December, so we'll see everybody back here in January. At our January 12th meeting, we'll have our work session on finance, which I think, Ron, you're working with Nikki on, correct? Oh, you're muted.
I will be working with Nikki on it, yes.
Great. So we'll have that work session, time probably 6, but we'll get that out to board members and the public in plenty of time. We'll have our ad hoc committee updates, potentially inclusionary practice model and mental health and wellness report. Our school health service grant from Luke, which will be exciting to hear about. Our first read of the new high school course proposals, potentially, and the National School Board Association convention discussion, and then we should have some policies to approve. So with that, I wish everybody happy holidays. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you back here in 2021. Meeting's adjourned.